Hello, kiddos. How are you? It's Phil. I hope you can hear me because I was testing my mic before and it wasn't working, but I believe it is now. How are you? Today we are going to talk about a short story called By the Waters of Babylon. And I believe I have the title correct. Yes, By the Waters of Babylon by Stephen Vincent Benet. And it's actually kind of an interesting short story. We will begin by actually looking in your book. So if you can all look right here on page 1012, it'll be the last story in your book. And it tells you a little bit about Stephen Vincent Benet, who he was. He lived from 1898 to 1943. And it gives you a little bit of background before you actually read the short story. It has themes of history and war, right? Because this was part of what was happening around that time. He was born in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, into a military family. He moved around to a lot of army posts in California and attended a military academy. And he wrote a book of poems, Five Men and Pompeii, in 1915. And World War One interrupted his studies. So you see a lot of these themes in this story. It's set in a future where the world may have ended due to war or even a nuclear disaster, although he wrote this before nuclear war. And later he turned to fiction. First, he published an autobiographical novel, The Beginning of Wisdom. He moved to France where he continued his studies. And then he wrote this epic Civil War poem, John Brown's Body, that received critical and popular acclaim. And he won the Pulitzer Prize for the book in 1929. And his fame grew. Benet was also interested in horror, mystery, and science fiction. So he wrote even a one-act play entitled The Headless Horseman, based on Washington Irving's story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which is a great story, and a cool movie by Tim Burton, too. And he wrote more short stories. He wrote a collection called 13 O'Clock, which has his famous story, The Devil and Daniel Webster, which is based on the German legend of Faust. And if you don't know that story, it's about a man who sells his soul to the devil. And that's a very, very famous story. And during the 1940s, he worked in radio as a screenwriter in Hollywood. And also, one second, guys. I just need. Okay, that's what happened. And he worked in radio as a screenwriter. Throughout his life, he suffered from poor vision and other illnesses, but continued to publish and earn honors as a writer. He eventually received the O. Henry Story Prize. O. Henry is a very famous American short story writer. Some consider him like the godfather of short story writing. And he won his second Pulitzer Prize posthumously for his epic poem, Western Star. The Pulitzer Prize is like the Oscars of the um, of writing, you could say. That and the Nobel Prize for Literature. Literature and reading preview. So, connecting to the story, how do you know when you become an adult? This story is about a kid who needs to go out on a sort of an adventure, what a Native Americans sometimes would call vision quests, where you have to go out and find the truth for yourself so that you can become a man. So that's a good thing for you to think about. How do you know when you become an adult? What is that one thing that you do that makes you an adult, that makes you feel like now I'm responsible for my own life and my own future and not my parents? A lot of readers and critics have interpreted the story as an allegory about the aftermath of a nuclear holocaust, although this story was written in 1937. Like I said, this was years before the first atomic weapons were developed. Uh, so the devastation of what would happen wouldn't have been known in Benet's time. So it's interesting when you read it, and it really does feel like it's a story about the aftermath of nuclear war, but he was born way before and they didn't have this. So he, like a lot of writers, they're visionaries, right? And he kind of just imagined a future like that just based on all the war that humanity had fought up to that point. And first person perspective, so you see everything through the narrator's eyes, and it's very visual. You know, he describes everything that he sees as he's traveling and getting closer to this area, which is a forbidden area, which we find out, spoilers, is the island of Manhattan after all this destruction. And it's forbidden for people, for his people, to go there, but he feels, due to a vision that he has, that he needs to go there. The narrator is a person who tells a story. The narrator may be outside the story or a character in the stories. Narrators can be reliable or unreliable. Unreliable narrators sometimes mislead readers to fail to understand the true meaning of the events. So ask yourself as you read the story, if you listen to it, I linked to the video here, but also on these slides that I will send to your email. I've linked the how do you call it, the place where you can go to listen to the story. It's about 28 minutes or so, so it's worth listening to, and you can put captions on if you need to. um, Reading strategy: visualize, create sensory image. This story is filled with vision, with what do you call it, with very visual language, as he's walking through the forest away from where he's supposed to be and moving east and getting to the island of Manhattan. You kind of figure out it's the island of Manhattan before they say it, just based on the visuals. And there's some vocabulary that you should know. One is bade, it's the past tense of bid, which is to command somebody to do something, very formal language. Anteroom is a small room serving as a waiting room or an entrance to a larger main room. Um, some houses have that still, but I haven't. It's been a while since I've been in a house that had an anteroom. And perplexed, troubled with doubt or uncertainty, and he is very perplexed in this story. And the story is going to start here. We're not going to read the whole story, but there are some questions as you are reading that you can think about. What have you learned about the identity of the narrator? What image of the narrator does the metaphor "my spirit was a cold stone" create? And we find out that he's the son of a priest. And there's the eagles flying. That's when he has a vision telling him that he needs to go east because the birds are going east. Do you think that the narrator believes all the things that are forbidden? How might this lead to a conflict? Because his father tells him, if you go out to that part of the world, it's forbidden. You can't go there. This reminded me a little bit of the original Planet of the Apes, where the apes say you cannot go over to the forbidden area. Nobody can go there. It's dead. And then when the main character does go there, he finds out that he sees the Statue of Liberty. It's a very famous scene, but it's all broken. And he realizes he's on planet Earth, but in the future, and that the apes have evolved and they can talk. So he didn't arrive on some other planet, but it's the forbidden zone. And that's an archetype that we see in a lot of stories, guys. So think of archetypes are those things that you see a lot in all different types of stories. What elements of the fantastic are in the paragraph at the top of this column? So you might want to read that paragraph up at the top. Again, we're not reading the whole story here, but I just want to bring your attention to some of these questions because they may end up on a test. Explain in your own words what John describes in the second paragraph of this column. So, nevertheless, oh no, the second paragraph, which I believe is the song there. Or is it this column? Yet after a while my eyes were open and I saw both banks of the river. I saw that once there had been God roads across it, though now they were broken and fallen like broken vines. Very great they were and wonderful and broken. So they're asking you to, what is he describing? And you'll find as you read it that the gods are representative of the people that used to live in these great buildings, but now they're all destroyed. So before the destruction, the technology was so great that they called these people gods. Imagine images or descriptions that appeal to one or more of the five senses. Visualize the animals in a dead place. To which senses do these images appeal? He's going to describe a bunch of animals there. And I believe we're almost at the end of the story here. Here to tell you what an anteroom is. What do you see when you visualize the pictures that John describes? Because as he's going into the city, he starts going into all these different houses and stuff. And he describes what he sees inside. What object does John see that says hot and cold? So you will have to read this page here. It's right around this paragraph here. In the washing place, a thing said hot, but it was not hot to the touch. Another thing said cold, but it was not cold. This must have been a strong magic, but the magic was gone. I do not understand. They had ways. I wish that I knew. So, what do you think he's describing there? How does John see the destruction of the city? Do you think his account is reliable? Would you believe him? Okay, based on this story. Why is the knowledge John learns about the gods important to him? But this is the end of the story here. Why do you think that when he tells his father, because he does tell his father at the end of his journey, why do you think it is that his father says, don't tell the other people? Because his father says that to him, and he says sometimes um, you it's not, people can't handle so much truth. You know, you need to take truth in a bit at a time. Now, if you give me a second here, I'm going to share now a second page, which we can thank, if it allows me to share it. Give me a second, because it's my computer's being very slow. But I believe that's it. By the waters of Babylon. Now, guys, thank Miss Danny Wood. She made these slides that we're going to look at real quick. By the waters of Babylon by Stephen Vincent Benet. By Miss Danny Wood. She's another teacher from Texas Tech. So let's look at this. Let's look at these slides that she made, and then we'll go back into the book and see if there's any questions there. So like I said, I added here to these slides a link to the short story on YouTube. 28 minutes and 19 seconds. The audio begins at 35 seconds, I believe. Okay, so in the beginning, you may think that your audio is broken. It's because the audio only starts at the 35-second mark. And we already talked about who Stephen Vincent Benet is or was. Here are some of the books that he wrote. And what is your opinion on nuclear weapons and the possibility of a nuclear holocaust? Have you ever been awed by places that you visited? That's an important thing to ask yourself, because this story is all about arriving in a new area, a new place. Have you ever ignored your parents' advice? Okay, because his father definitely said, don't go there. But he's having these dreams, these visions, and they kind of tell him he needs to go there. So, themes in the short story: the pursuit of knowledge, It's a coming of age story. He needs new knowledge. Then this new knowledge is going to change him. It's going to make him mature in a specific way. Okay. So that's what we call coming of age story. And Benet presents the desire for knowledge as a key aspect of human nature and a driving force behind the development of human nature, but also possibly its destruction. Some scientists argue that the fact that humans want so much knowledge and want so much information is what may be our end. And the other animals who are happy just being animals and eating and sleeping and eating and sleeping and then making babies and eating and sleeping are the ones that are going to be here way longer than us. So knowledge is a double-edged sword. Yes, it can be dangerous. And the story centers around this journey that John takes to a place of the gods as part of his initiation into manhood in the tribe's priesthood. And it's an example of the hero's journey, an archetypical story arc that is common in both ancient myths and modern stories, but it's from a coming of age perspective. Remember, guys, we did this video in ninth grade, I believe, what makes a hero. So if you want to review that, you can play that. There's a lot of superstition, magic, and technology. This story takes place in a post-technological world because the world's been destroyed for some reason. They don't tell you why. There's a lot of superstition because John, which is the main character, the narrator, he sees visions. He believes in these visions, and these visions want to take him over to the east and eventually get to this place that he's not supposed to go to. And he believes in these laws that tell him don't go there. There is a rivalry, although it doesn't amount to much, but there's these two groups of people that are depicted, the hill people and the forest people. The rivalry between the hill and the forest people can be seen both as a criticism of the essential silly and superficial reasons for rivalries between groups of people. And who are the characters? Before you read, take a look at Antigone's slides to review archetype. How are the four themes present in the story? Is John, the narrator, reliable? What are the archetypes you can identify? Well, we already had coming of age. That's one that always happens. Which line of the passage of the story had the greatest impact on you? Do you think the author was making a cautionary statement about modern society through the story? So let's go back to, and we'll finish out with this. Go back to sharing our CBE. And we'll see that there's a lot of the similar things here. What is the event that determines that John will one day be a priest? Okay. This priestly calling, do you think John considers it a privilege or a burden? Do and that's an important thing because when we come of age, sometimes we have a challenge that may not exactly be a good thing. It's a conflict for us. So this also leads to thinking, what type of conflict are we having? Is it man versus nature, man versus self? Okay, there's many different types of conflicts that you guys have studied before. What type of conflict do you think he's going through? And well, it kind of answers right here. What internal conflict must John overcome? There's a lot of internal conflict more than external in this story. How does John change from the beginning to the end of the story? Do you believe John is being disrespectful by ignoring his father's advice on the law? And while in the place of the gods, John had an extraordinary vision of what the world once was like, followed by a vision of its destruction. Do you think that this is a cautionary tale? This is the question that was in the slide. Again, it keeps asking if you think John is a reliable or unreliable narrator? And reread the pink highlighted question on page 1024 to help you get started. How might the tone of the story be affected if it were narrated by a different character or someone outside the story? Now remember, guys, sometimes unreliability is not that the narrator is lying to you, but because they may not exactly understand what's going on around them. Because understand that he calls a lot of these people the gods, but all they were people that were before him, that came before him, and they had greater technology. So when you think of reliable, unreliable, don't think, oh, he's the guy that's lying to me, or he's not telling me all of the truth on purpose because he's a bad guy. That's not always what a reliable or unreliable narrator means. Sometimes a child can be the narrator of a story, and we know a child sees the world very different. So they may be seeing something that to us is normal, but to them is something fantastical, and they don't know how to describe it. So that can create some form of unreliability in the narration. And finally, here they're talking about descriptive language. There's a whole lot of it, and they want you to kind of practice with the vocabulary: bade, after room or anteroom, and perplexed. And that is all. Okay, I told you this would be a quick video. And soon you will get your video for The Alchemist. Just trying to figure out how to make it the best that I can for you. So that you just get the main ideas of the story quickly. Okay, guys, have a great afternoon. And I will add to these slides that Miss Danny sent. I will send you the link to this YouTube video. Goodbye.